as a woman in engineering, there's like not as much exposure having that as a career as men. Something I'm very passionate about. Like once a year, I'll go to a high school and just present, who I am and my career and the path towards what it might look like to become an engineer. And the kids are totally excited and love learning about what it looks like.
Joining us in the studio today is a mountain and gravel cyclist. By day, she's a reliability engineer. She's a relative newcomer to competition, but gaining momentum fast. Off the bike, she's also a wife, sister, and entrepreneur. Please welcome Deanna Mayles. Hi, Deanna.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, good. So good to have you joining the show today. This is a unique and wonderful experience for us because we get to join, you get to join us as a SRAM team member on the show. Normally we have athletes, pro athletes, and we'll get into your journey there, but so great to have you. Deanna, where are you calling in from the world today?
So I'm calling in from Colorado Springs, which is where I live and work. But originally I'm from Northeast Ohio.
All right, but Colorado Springs is home for you now?
Yep.
How long have you been in Colorado Springs?
So I moved to Colorado Springs in 2019, so between 4 and 5 years. And
Right.
before that, I actually lived in Tucson, Arizona, which is like a very, very beautiful place.
Oh, yeah.
Great place to bike. So yeah, by way of Tucson.
Cool, cool. All right, well, we will get into your journey and your career, but let's start. You're familiar with the show. We're going to talk about some foundational stuff right now, and so let's just start there from the beginning. You kind of already talked about geography a little bit, but where were you born?
Yeah, so I was born in a small town called Painesville, Ohio.
Mm,
And that was maybe just 15 minutes from where I grew up in Mentor, which is about 30 minutes from Cleveland, Ohio. Like on the lake, very nice area.
And what did your parents do growing up?
So my dad was always in manufacturing, and he has a specialty working with electronics. And his current role is actually similar to what I do for SRAM. So he's in
No way.
liability group. But he's actually tech, so he runs the tests and like he works for a medical sterilization company. So they'll do like shaker table tests and life tests that he'll run. So we're actually like working in similar divisions, just totally different industries.
That's funny.
So yeah, I know. So we'll chat about like, yeah, what his team's working on and what we're working on and swap some ideas occasionally. But yeah, so that's what my dad does. And then my mom was a homemaker.
Okay. Do you have any siblings?
Yeah, so I have two amazing sisters, and one is a couple years older, one's a couple years younger. The older one is an art teacher at high school, and she also teaches photography, and she's really great at it. And my younger sister, she's a nurse.
Tell me about your childhood and activities. Like, what were you into as a kid?
Yeah, so I would say, like, as a young kid, I just have a ton of memories of my dad taking us on these like crazy long hikes and us kids dragging our feet and not really wanting to go and him wanting to explore. But as I got a bit older, middle school and high school, I picked up cross country and track. So that was kind of like my main activity in that time of my life. And I just remember like loving going on bike rides with friends, but super casual in that regard. And then when I went to college, I walked on to the Ohio State cross country team. So I did that for a season. But between, going to school for engineering and sport, I thought it was just a little bit too much. So there were a couple years where I didn't really do too much in terms of activity because I was so focused on school. But yeah, kind of the later years of college is when I got more serious into bike riding.
Let's before we jump into college, I'm curious to stay a little bit younger. When you were a kid and you were either hiking or biking or running cross country. Were there any heroes of the sport or sports that you admired? Any professional athletes that you thought, oh my, I love what they're doing, and one day I want to be like them?
Yeah, so oh, I think the lady's name was Tara Goucher. She's like a marathon Olympic runner. So yeah, in junior high and high school, I had like a Runner's World magazine subscription and I saw her a lot. So I just thought that was, yeah, really cool. But yeah, I never really thought being a professional in athletics was my path whatsoever. But I always admired, um, yeah, her in that space. And I guess I kind of lost a little bit of that memory. But yeah, I remember reading about her a lot.
Yeah, cool. Well, let's talk about your influence, probably of your father on you and your educational sort of path. Was he the influence there? I mean, you're essentially doing a similar thing. Did he push you or motivate you to become an engineer of some sort?
Um, I would actually say it was more of my grandpa. So that
Hmm,
was my mom's dad. He was an engineer and he worked for GE, which was like local in that area, for years and years and years. And I remember he would always show me different drawings. Um, and I always thought that was really cool. And he actually has a patent for um, a light bulb, which is the current
wow.
design, like how it screws in right now, which is really cool. But yeah, I would say it was him. He was always career focused. Um, so yeah, I would say it was him. And also some teachers in high school, I would say.
Let's talk about college. So you graduate high school. I'm assuming you had kind of a heavy STEM track in high school that led you into Ohio State. What was your major at Ohio State?
So yeah, my major is in mechanical engineering, and then I have a minor in entrepreneurship.
Nice. Well, those are two fun ones. So in school, let's jump to Ohio State now. So you're there. You kind of hit pause a little bit on your athletics to focus on your career, or not your career, but your degree, right?
hmm
How was your experience in college?
So I would say the first 2 years were really a struggle, like in terms of the classes and the like level of academia, like academics that they were that was required. It was just a lot of studying, and in high school I would just say I didn't need to study like whatsoever. So I really struggled, and there were some classes like I didn't do very well. So I started particularly in chemical engineering, and especially like the later classes of chemistry really got to me. And that's kind of when I actually switched to mechanical engineering, which is like a lot more general, and I think you can do a lot more with it, but still have that engineering mindset, which is core to me. But yeah, after those 2 years, I was really like, wow, this is difficult. And then I really buckled down and then
Yeah,
did great after that. Like once I got into the major, it was all kind of smooth sailing after that point.
nice. Do you remember what was your first job out of school?
So my first job out of school was with Caterpillar. And so I had interned with them as a student, and they offered me a full-time job. And the job was actually really interesting. So that's what brought me to Tucson. And it was their mining division. So they're based out of Illinois, but that's all kind of their ag and like general construction equipment. So anyway, they have this division in Tucson that's specifically for mining. And I actually worked on a mine site on really huge mining trucks as a test engineer. So really interesting part of my life. But yeah, that was my first job.
Cool. Tell us a little bit more. I want to learn more about what a test engineer does and what a reliability engineer does, so that, I think those are a bit of a mystery to our audience. So let's start with a test engineer. So specifically, like, give us an example of something you did.
Yeah, so once the designer comes up with, their design and it's in CAD, then they'll send it to like somewhere to be manufactured. And in Caterpillar's case, there's a lot of like subcontractors. Um, and before they can sell that particular product, they'll send it to where I worked, which is kind of like a test development site. So we'd build these two-story machines, and to make sure they ran right and fit right, you run tests. So with this huge machine that has to do so much work, there's all sorts of tests that take like 2 years to run through that full development cycle. So for example, they'll strain gauge particular areas and run them through a course and take data. And so my job was to basically manage the machine and have the teams instrument them. And then I would go out there with a laptop and connect to this data acquisition system with hundreds of sensors all throughout the machine. And I would collect that data.
Got it. Got it. I think you just jumped way above my head with all that, but I got it. I understand the basic principles.
Yeah, before it's sold, you got to take data, make sure it's exactly what you want to
And
verify
you're
it.
you're making sure that those machines, before they go into manufacturing, you're making sure that they work as planned,
Yeah,
right?
yep, yep. And there's like a bunch of engine tests too that's based on, you're collecting fan speed and temperature and pressures in like different areas. So yeah, you're taking a lot of data and making sure it's as the designer intended.
Yeah. All right, so you're in Tucson, you're at Caterpillar, you're a test engineer. Pretty cool gig. I mean, Tucson's a cool town, Caterpillar's a cool company. You're using your mechanical engineering degree in the real world. How long were you there, and why did you leave?
So I was there for about 4 years. And yeah, it was a hard choice to leave just because I did love the town. Um, but I actually had been wanting to work in the bike industry for years. Kind of as I mentioned in college, I got into biking through my dad, road biking specifically, and joined the club team. And I was like, well, this is so cool. And also, I'm an engineer. Like, there's got to be jobs in this space. So every year or so, I would apply as an intern and then, you know, a recent grad. And so I left because there was this job at SRAM as a reliability engineer. And I saw it. I was like, that sounds so cool, and applied, and just better opportunity.
Yeah. Were you married at the time? Did you meet your husband in Tucson or did you meet him in Colorado?
So I met him on my first day of work at SRAM.
That's funny. And he was already a SRAM team member, right?
Yep, so he had been working for SRAM maybe like a year or two before that point.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so you made the leap 4 years or so after Tucson, and you interviewed and you got the job, right? So you just packed up and moved from Tucson to Colorado Springs. Is that how it happened?
Yep, yep. My dad and I rented a truck and we drove it over, and yeah, that the rest is history there.
And your first job, so 2019, is that right? Is that when you started?
Yep, I started with SRAM in 2019.
Okay. And your first job was reliability engineer, right?
At SRAM, yep.
Yeah. For RockShox or for another brand of product?
So I would say because I started in the like Colorado Development Center,
Yeah.
there's a ton of RockShox products. So that's kind of like where I started a lot of my work. But now it's expanded to like, you know, a ton of other products and brands. And The funny thing is, I'm actually the only reliability engineer at SRAM right now supporting, the company. So I'm spread a little bit thin, but also my manager has that skill set too, so he can jump into.
Yeah. All right. So for the audience, we've learned a little bit about what a test engineer is. What the heck is a reliability engineer?
Yeah, so if you think about the core of the word reliability, it's kind of like consistency. So just making sure that the product works for our riders for years and years to come. So making sure that when they buy the product, it's reliable. So in essence, the core to that is figuring out how our customers use the product, and that's specifically like the loads, the forces, and pressures. So we'll take data to get like a understanding of the type of stresses they'll put on that product, and then we'll estimate, what's the use case, how long will they use it. So from that information, we'll create a test in the lab to basically simulate that and replicate it. And we actually put the product through a ton of damage in the lab and actually run it to what we call run to failure. So then we can look at like the failure mechanisms, and how will this product fail? What's the weakest link so we know where to improve?
Yeah.
And then also where like the consistency reliability portion comes in is that it's very statistics heavy, very math heavy, so you can actually calculate how reliable something is.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
Do you love your job?
it's pretty great. Yeah, I love it.
It sounds like you love your job, which is awesome. I love meeting people that love what they do. Do you think you're uniquely qualified to do what you do because you're both a mechanical engineer and a cyclist?
I think I don't think you have to be a cyclist. Definitely not. Um, I think there's some people who love the math and love the statistics behind it. And so I guess like maybe I am slightly more suited because I'm so passionate in both areas. But yeah, I think you definitely don't have to be a cyclist to work at SRAM or work in this position.
Let's talk about your husband for a moment because as you just shared, you met him on your first day at SRAM, and that grew into something wonderful, right? And he's also a team member at SRAM. What does he do?
Yeah, so he is on the rear shock team under the RockShox brand. And currently he is a design engineer. And his current project is cross country focused, but might be moving out into that space, into the more enduro trail space in his next project. But yeah, he's been at SRAM for 5 or 6 years now.
Yeah.
And before
Lo-
that, he was actually a quality engineer for a couple years on the same team.
Okay. Does he love his job?
Yeah, he loves his job. He's very good at his job. He,
Yeah.
yeah, he's been known to be such a hard worker and very creative in terms of like mechanical systems. Um, so he's always like doing stuff at her house and other people's house, and yeah, he's super talented in that space.
Awesome. Deanna, let's change gears a little bit and let's talk about racing. So you didn't set out when you moved to Colorado Springs to be a racer. You set out to join a company in the bike industry and you checked that box. You were always a cyclist, right? And you gave it up for a little bit because of school to focus on your studies and whatnot, but you picked it back up. And then, 2019 rolls around, you're in Colorado Springs. Tell us about the journey to the Pikes Peak Apex, which maybe would have been one of your first races, or tell us about that moment that something said, you know what? I want to race. I want to enter a race. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, so I would say my love of mountain biking specifically started in Tucson. And that's when I got my first mountain bike. So there were years and years of just being super passionate about like learning how to ride and improving my skills. And then with the job at joining SRAM, I was like, oh, it's to bring the passion of what you love into your work was really cool. Um, and so yeah, there were years of just really, really enjoying the ride, enjoying people and the company. But yeah, I would say I've always been like kind of quick and had that endurance and some athletic background. And for years, people said, oh, you should get into racing. And I thought, I don't really understand like why anyone would do that at the time.
Yeah.
Um, just because I was like, why start up on a line like when you can just go out? But it was actually, the Pikes Peak Apex, the first year was 2020. Um, RockShox was a sponsor of that race. It was in town. A lot of people were super excited about it. Um, and I knew some of the trails, and my family was really encouraging me to sign up. But I was not sure if I could do like 4 really hard days in a row. So that was kind of like my main limiting factor. But they all voted. My family voted one day, and everyone said, you got to do it. So I did it. And I did a lot better than I thought I would. And it was a lot more fun. And you can kind of like push yourself in a way that you can't just out on a ride. So that kind of like sparked something for me. Just feeling so accomplished at the end of that. But the following year, I had done that race again, and then like a really small grassroots race on Monarch Crest called the Monarch Mindbender, which is the brainchild of a couple people here at the office of just ridiculous trails, looping, looping, looping. I think there's like 14,000 feet of descending, 12,000 feet of ascending. I think it's close to like 100 miles. Anyway, that was
Wow.
my main summer goal in 2021. And after I finished that, I was like, whoa, I have like a skill that I didn't realize was there, was like these like ultra endurance, super suffering things. So yeah, near the end of the 2021 season, I was like on fire for racing just from like those 3 kind of experiences. Um, so 2022, the goal was just try a bunch of different stuff, see what clicks, see what I like. And now with the 2023 season, it really set me up well to, be be accepted into the Grand Prix with
Right.
some of my results I had. But yeah, I would just say like I always was race curious. And I really needed that extra push to enter into that space just because these races are so long and so big. I always thought, can I do that? I'm not sure. But once you can kind of get a taste of that, yeah, you keep chasing it.
Let's go back to the Pikes Peak Apex. So 2020, it's the local race. We're a sponsor of it. Your family convinces you to do it. You're like, okay, I'm just going to see what happens. You actually did pretty darn good. Tell us how you did.
Yeah, so I think it was top 10, but there were a ton of like, national champions, Olympians, amazing, amazing people. And I'm just out there with my flat shoes, the only one in flat shoes at the start. And I have no understanding of like nutrition. I think I was actually eating like cheese sticks and beef jerky because I'm like, oh, that'll keep me full for all these hours. So yeah, top 10's amazing for flat shoes and beef jerky.
That's pretty amazing. The following year when you did the Monarch Mindbender, how'd you do there?
So that is like a really small, yeah, grassroots event. So I was the second woman finisher ever. Like the previous year, there had been one. So that was the course record. I think I beat the course record by 2 hours.
Wow.
And of all the people who showed up, maybe there were 30 or so. I think I finished fifth of all of them. So there were a lot of people who didn't finish. It's pretty grueling day. But yeah, I did really well.
That's amazing. Between 2020 and 2021, did you learn a bit about hydration and nutrition? Had you changed your routine yet or still not?
So I would say I learned more last year in terms of, yeah, nutrition and hydration, but I think for that race in particular, there were some people at the office who were buying, these super high calorie drink mixes. Um, they're like, you don't have to eat anything. I was like, that's great. So I just sustained myself on that. I don't remember. I think it was maybe like, I can't remember the number of hours, maybe 8 hours or something. But yeah, that's what I had tried and it seemed to work that day.
Nice, nice. So that's a pretty cool story, right? Sort of out of nowhere, almost overnight success and confidence. But now you've got to learn a heck of a lot, right? From licensing to nutrition and hydration and mechanical stuff. Like you got to keep your bike going, and you probably hadn't done all that yet. So, you know, were you just self-motivated? Did you have a big team around you helping you, or where did some of the assistance come in?
I would say, yeah, there was a lot to learn. Still learning process. But as far as bike setup, it's been really nice to have a ton of like ex racers here at work. So they're always saying, "Oh, got to do this, got to do that." So they would give me some advice of, how to set up, certain gear choices.
Yeah.
And then my husband is out actually really, really great, and he spends a lot of his, free time working on my bikes, so that's really appreciated. So yeah, we're kind of like a dynamic duo there.
Nice. So he's your on the road mechanic
Yep, totally.
and support staff.
Yeah.
What about nutrition and hydration? Who looks over that? Are you becoming an expert now in those areas?
Yeah, I'm trying to become an expert. So I have a coach, as of recently, maybe like the last 6 months. Yeah, Rose Grant. So she is, has been there, done that a lot. So she
Yeah.
has been giving me tips and great advice. But I actually, have tried a ton of different products and, had particular issues with certain things. And I've actually come to find some mix that works for me and it's sustained me and have no problem. So that's full of formulas and I think it's really great. So yeah, they've been giving me a lot of pointers of how much to drink and eat and throughout a particular type of effort.
That's great. What about off the bike? Are you working out in a gym? Are you doing any cross training? Or are you just riding your bike?
So last year I was just 99% riding my bike. And near the end of last season, people are like, "Oh, like what kind of workouts are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I did like 10 push-ups this season." So it's come to my attention that that's very important. So I'll usually spend 2 or 3 days a week doing like balance and strength stuff.
Yeah,
Um, I don't go to a gym. I have like a few weights and exercise balls at home that I'll do that. But yeah, outside that, my husband and I both we love skiing, so we'll spend maybe a few days here and there skiing, and that's great cross training too.
sure.
But yeah, trying to mix it up and not be, yeah, super uh, focused only on the bike.
Yeah, yeah. Well, now that you're sort of in it, do you have new heroes of the sport that you're following that you want to be like? If I were to steal your phone and look at your Instagram feed and see who you follow, like who are the athletes that you follow today?
Yeah, so when the Grand Prix was announced, who was involved in that, all the women I followed just to
Yeah,
see like, what they're doing, what they're like. They give a lot of race recaps and such. So though that group is like totally my focus, but I would say for a long time, it actually my like bike hero has actually been Rose Grant.
mm,
And it's honestly like a dream come true a little bit for me just to have her be my coach. But like how that came about was actually, um, at the end of last season being like, what direction should I go? Like I did one World Cup, which was like crazy to do. I did some national championships and just a lot of endurance type events. So through all that, I was unsure of like the direction to go. And Rose being so sweet and such a big advocate for women in cycling and racing. And then I saw that she was retiring from professional racing. I thought she's been through the whole circle. Like she'd be a great person to ask for advice or be a mentor or something. And actually, before we met on a phone call, she was open to a phone call. I didn't know her at the time.
Yeah.
I was like, best case scenario, she's retiring from professional racing and she's going into coaching and willing to take me on. And that was like what happened. The stars aligned.
That's awesome. And so she's your virtual coach, right? You guys just meet online or on over video calls, right?
Yep.
That's great to have someone like that.
Yeah. And just she's honestly one of the most sweet, down to earth people in racing who I've interacted with. So just to have her as like, yeah, that athlete mindset, but then also like have that personal side too is just really appreciated.
Yeah. Deanna, what's driving you to become a competitive athlete? I mean, you have a very rich, rewarding career. You have a family, you have friends, you live in a beautiful area, you can ski, you can bike, you can run, you can hike, you can do it all. But it sounds like something's missing and you're being driven to do this professional racing thing. Where's that coming from?
Well, I would just say some people say, "Oh, where did you come from?" or like, "Why are you getting into this now?" I would just say that I've always been this way and I've always been extremely competitive and out on a typical ride, like I would always be pushing the pace or something. So I've always been sort of like training in essence. But now I just feel like I've discovered this way to have that outlet of something I've always been doing. In different periods of my life, racing wasn't there just because I had a different focus, like either school or family or building a house or something, construction projects that have just taken over. So now this is like, once I'm introduced to it, I wish that time had always been there.
Yeah,
But yeah, definitely excited to go for it. But I would just say I've always been doing this just kind of in the background.
yeah, yeah.
But also really excited to like add more structure and like get better.
Were you competitive with your sisters growing up?
Yeah, yeah, they would tell you yes.
And did you always have to win? Would you ever let one of them win
No,
at any?
gotta be the smartest, fastest, best, whatever. Yeah, it's you know, it's a nice thing to have sometimes, but sometimes, you wish you were a little bit more relaxed.
Yeah. So let's talk about 2023. So we're in it. It's almost April. What is on your race calendar for 2023?
Yeah, so I would say definitely the Lifetime Grand Prix, all those races are top of the list, top of my priority. Um, and then kind of have some other marathon endurance events sprinkled in there. So I just completed Moab Rocks this last weekend. That was a 3-day race in Moab. My next race is Sea Otter, so that's the first race of the Grand Prix. But also super excited for Marathon Nationals. I think that's in September timeframe. That's another race I'll be focused on.
Yeah.
And kind of sooner also is the Whiskey Off Road. So an epic rides race, 50-mile backcountry race, super fun last year. So looking forward to that. But definitely Grand Prix is like the focus.
That's the big one. That's a cool one, right? Because they have equal pricing for men and women, right?
Yep, yep.
That's amazing. Um, Deanna, you mentioned Marathon Nationals, and I don't think everyone that's listening or calling or listening in knows what Marathon Nationals is, or even what a marathon bike race is. Um, I think if I heard the word marathon nationals, think, well, you have to run 26 miles? What's that all about? What is marathon in cycling?
Yeah, so the traditional discipline is cross country Olympics, so XCO, and that's what's in, you'll go to the Olympics in that event in mountain biking. Um, and that's about an hour and a half race. And anything a lot longer than that, they'll consider like a marathon length event. So it's usually a 3 to 5 hour effort, usually somewhere about 40 or 50 miles.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not as, um, XCO is all out the whole time, whatever you got for an hour and a half. Whereas the longer type events, you can settle in. There's obviously a fast start and fast finish, but yeah, it's more endurance based.
Okay. And is that your particular sort of niche is sort of longer distance, more endurance, pain and suffering over many, many hours?
Yeah, I would definitely say that that's more my strength. Something, yeah, in the 3, 4 hour range. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about gravel versus mountain bikes. So where do you land there? Are you doing both? Do you prefer one over the other?
Definitely prefer mountain biking. The gravel bike is new to me, so that's sort of, a risk to start doing these gravel events.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I got my gravel bike finished building it up in January or December, so it's
Hmm.
still super new. But at the same time, kind of my roots in cycling came from road biking. And for years I wanted to get back to road biking, and my husband Dennis was pure mountain biker. He's like, "Oh, why would you want to ride on the road?" So anyway, it's a good excuse to get back to that, and I'm super excited to discover more about gravel racing, but definitely a newbie in that area.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's transition a little bit to Deanna as an influencer or an entrepreneur of sorts in this, mountain biking world. You've got this full-time killer career at SRAM, but because of your race passion, you've got the attention of a lot of brands, including ours. Um, I feel like this is like the past 12 months has been like the year of Deanna. Like you've just blown up in the world of cycling and the cycling community. Um, you've got a bunch of partners now. You just mentioned Flo, your nutrition partner. You've got an apparel partner. Obviously, you've got a components partner with us. Um, Tell us about what you're doing, on that side of your career and how's that been for you?
Yeah, so I think I have some kind of friends who would talk about building a brand, building your brand for a few years, and I always thought, what what does that mean? So now that kind of am in racing, there's a bit of a spotlight. I actually stayed away from social media for years and only recently got Instagram just, for racing and to post results and, share stuff. And it's a great sharing platform. But yeah, I'm sort of like building my brand and making relationships and partnerships and that are mutually beneficial. And it's just really fun to meet other people, especially in the case of Flow. They're a super small company, Colorado based, and like, I just love, being a part of that and being a part of helping them grow their business. And yeah, it's just been a fun experience to meet all these kinds of different people. But yeah, mostly focused on, yeah, how to present yourself and build your brand and grow.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm super appreciative and respectful of you, sort of juggling both, right? You've got this full-time gig at SRAM, but you're also, really interested in racing and what that might bring. Could you ever see yourself going full-time pro and leaving a engineering career?
That's a difficult question. I would just say I do really love my job, and I think it would have to be, I would just say that's not my goal. My goal is
Yeah.
not to leave my job. Um, but I'm sort of just progressing in this space and I'm not sure where I'll end up, but it could possibly be something that happens, but it would have to be the right time and the right place and that.
Yeah.
So,
Is there any part of you that wishes that you had started racing earlier?
oh yeah, you can always have regrets and wish you did something sooner, but it just wasn't the time. Like, and maybe if I would have started younger, I'd be burnt out by now. And yeah, you can't speculate on the past, but now's the time, and I had a lot of focus and fun on in other areas.
Yeah. Deanna, let's get back to racing then. So, you've really only been racing for 3 years or so. What have been some of the scariest moments, if any, that you've had along the way?
Yeah, scariest moments. I would say I was scared when I went to a World Cup. So that was I went to the World Cup finals in Val di Sole last year. And, you have a couple days of pre-riding the course, and there were some features I rolled up to, and I just looked at them for a while, and I thought, I don't know if I could do that.
Really?
Yeah, like there was this rock garden thing, bigger features, and I'm standing at the top, and girls are whizzing by going down it, and they're like, "Oh, it's not even that hard," and I'm like, "It looks kind of big to me on this small bike." And so I stood there for 20 minutes, kind of scoping it out, watching people, and um, I was getting down on myself. And then my husband, I saw him walking up the hill, and we talked. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this, and he said, "Oh, you could do it." So he really motivated me. But in the end, I think they try and make features look worse than they are. But it's all rideable and possible. But yeah, that was a scary moment where I'm like, I came all this way across the pond to do this race, and now I'm not sure if I can do this particular section. But yeah, overcame some fears, practice it, and in the race, just focus on your line.
Yeah. And you ended up, and was that the XCO that you were participating in?
Yep.
How'd you do overall?
So the bummer is about that um I was forgotten off the registration list
Hmm.
from Team USA. So because of that, I got registered a little bit late, like the last day that you could in person. So I had the last start, which is not ideal.
Oh yeah.
So I think from like 80th or 90th place start, I finished something in 50s. So, I mean, it's not
Well,
top 10, not top 3, but I think for my first experience, like, yeah, it was great.
well, and to pass, 40 people on a course that only lasts an hour or so,
Pretty brutal. Pretty brutal.
that's a lot of dust to breathe in, right?
Yep. Yep.
Well, that's awesome. Um, Deanna, what a great story. One of the things that this show dives deep into, which we won't really do with you, is advocacy and community, because you're really starting out in your journey. But in one of the conversations we had, you mentioned a short trip with Lindsay and the Ladies All Ride tour and learning about them and what they do and getting some skills. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so you had asked me, are there any areas or opportunity that you'd love to work with? And immediately what came to mind was Lindsay's Ladies All Ride. So years ago, when I was like kind of learning how to ride a mountain bike in Tucson, she's good friends with a lady named Tara who owns Homegrown Shuttles in Tucson. Anyway, they're good friends, and there was an event, and she asked Lindsay to come in and do a women's clinic. And I just had a great time. At the time, I was a part of some other women's groups, but there wasn't ever any skills or clinic component of that. So to have Lindsay come in and have that similar group of people and break things down in the way that she does is so great. So anyway, as like a future opportunity, I would love to, if she was ever looking for like an extra coach or someone to go to an event, like would love to participate and be on the other side of that one day.
Yeah. Deanna, if you knew that there were 1,000 young girls listening to this show that were into cycling, or into the bike industry, what kinds of things would you tell them about where to go or where to learn more, either about the industry or about cycling, like programs? What could you share some resources or advice?
Yeah, so I would just say get involved with a women's group, possibly in your area. That was like a huge core piece for me, developing as a mountain biker and, getting women who would be great ride partners. You can kind of find who's in your skill area. And so that's also like an amazing source of fun and stuff like that. But what I would probably tell them though, as words of wisdom that would have been meaningful to me is just take risks. Like, don't be super afraid of, oh, riding this maybe enduro trail or something. Like, you can always go slow or walk something if you're nervous, but like take on challenges. And I think, it took me a couple years to get to that point to take on certain races or something like that. But yeah, just go for it and don't be so afraid about what might happen.
Yeah, yeah, well said. Let's pivot and talk about engineering too, because I know from knowing you a little bit that you also have some extracurricular work with the engineering field, and tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I would just say, being as a woman in engineering, there's like not as much exposure as having that as a career as men. So I've always been involved in those types of groups, either in college or post college. Um, but Society of Women Engineers is a great organization that does a lot of goes to events and recruiting events to motivate women to join that particular career field. But even outside of that, it's something that I find to be like almost something I'm very passionate about. Like once a year, I'll go to a high school and just present, who I am and my career and the path towards what it might look like to become an engineer to students. So at my sister's school, even though she teaches art, she's connected me with the engineering teachers there. So I'll usually go to their classroom, yeah, about once a year and do that presentation. And the kids are totally excited and love learning about what it looks like.
That's awesome. Now, I may be a little biased at SRAM, but if I were to score SRAM in terms of, men women balance in engineering, of course it's male dominated, but we do pretty well compared to maybe the rest of the industry or the industry as a whole. How would you rate us? And, yeah, how would you rate us?
I would say they're the best place I've ever experienced in terms of equality. Um, I mean, even just comparing to Caterpillar, I was one of, I think, like three other women engineers of a group of about 100. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's typical in that type of space. But yeah, SRAM has done an amazing job with attracting women. Like I mean, even in engineering and then the cycling industry, those are two
Yeah.
male dominant areas. So yeah, I think SRAM's doing a great job attracting the right people.
Did you know that before you joined? And was that something that drew you to our brand?
So I think I did ask that as a question, like what opportunities are there for women? Are there like leadership groups or anything like that? And so yeah, that was definitely something I had asked during the like recruitment process.
Yeah.
And actually the cool thing is, um, now that it rings a bell, so we're starting that up again and so there's a women's leadership committee uh ring basically. And so yeah, I'll be on the other side of that and be a mentor this season,
Oh,
which I'm really
great.
excited about.
Killer.
Yeah.
Well, exciting to see where you go in your career. I'm excited to watch you and see you at Sea Otter. I'll be out there and I'll be cheering for you.
Yeah, thank
Um,
you.
we are almost out of time, but there is one last section of our show, which is our speed round, where I throw a bunch of this or that at you, and sort of we get to psychologically profile you. Are you ready for that?
Yeah.
All right. Pancakes or waffles?
Waffles.
Coffee or tea?
Neither.
Neither. Wow.
I don't care for either.
I'm the same. I never really got into either. Tacos or burritos?
Burritos.
Spicy or mild?
Mild.
Cold weather or hot weather?
Uh, hot weather.
Rain or snow?
Snow.
The mountains or the beach?
Mountains all the way.
Cities or suburbs?
City.
Cars or trucks?
Truck.
Pavement or dirt?
Dirt. Trail.
Gloves or gloveless?
Oh, if I could go gloveless and have no problems, I'd go gloveless, but too much risk.
Yeah, I like my hands nice and clean. Clipped in or flat pedals?
Oof. I like clipped in now, yeah, but for years I was all flat for life, but clipped in.
Yeah. Now you know the benefits, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Low pressure or high pressure in your tires?
super low.
Fix it yourself or take it to your husband?
Husband.
Yeah. And last question, dogs or cats?
Dogs all the way, yep.
Awesome. Deanna Mayles, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, hearing your story. Thanks for sharing, and have an awesome day.
Yeah, thanks. I'll catch you later.
Thanks. Cheers.
Bye.